Do you believe they did this Venezuela thing for the reasons they say they did it? They said it was about fentanyl. That was their initial explanation. Even they now acknowledge, though, that fentanyl doesn't actually come from Venezuela. Then they tweaked that pretext to say, okay, it is about drugs, but it's not fentanyl. Okay, maybe that was wrong. It's about cocaine. Yeah, because if one thinks about crusading against cocaine, one definitely thinks about the Trump family. Am I right? But that was an awkward pretext, too, because even though some cocaine does come through Venezuela, experts say that cocaine is generally bound for Europe, not for the United States. So that's kind of a weird thing for us to be all fired up about them in particular. That pretext was then completely blown up anyway when Trump gave a pardon to the former president of Honduras, who really was convicted of trafficking more than 400 tons of cocaine, not to Europe, but to the United States. If Trump supposedly cares so much about a foreign leader being responsible for trafficking cocaine into the United States, why did Trump pardon a foreign leader literally convicted of smuggling hundreds of tons of cocaine into the United States? Why did he do that? If he cares about this, right? Well, he said at the time that he did it, quote, because if somebody sells drugs in that country, that doesn't mean you arrest the president. That's what he said about pardoning the guy from Honduras. So the idea that Trump needed to arrest the guy in Venezuela for that same alleged crime, he pardoned the president of Honduras for that, but he needed to go invade Venezuela to get the president there for that same thing? How do you make sense of that? Maybe the only way to make sense of that is to acknowledge rationally that that is maybe not the real motivation at work for what we just did in Venezuela, right? So what is the real motivation at work? I mean, they've tried a few different explanations when those kind of slid off the slippery slope, right? After they invaded and abducted Maduro this weekend, Trump told reporters that Maduro was a dictator, which is true. But that is not exactly a mark against someone from Donald Trump's perspective. He loves dictators. Remember when he told Fox News he wants his people to pay attention to him the way they pay attention to Kim Jong-un in North Korea? Right? I mean, Trump said the thing he likes the most about Xi Jinping in China is that he's seized power for life. Trump rolled out a literal red carpet for Vladimir Putin in Alaska and then kind of danced on it with excitement while he was waiting for him to get there. Yeah, Maduro being a dictator is the problem? They're also now saying that Maduro wasn't the legitimately elected president of Venezuela. And yes, fair enough. But is that really why we invaded? If Trump's supposed reason for invading Venezuela and abducting, seizing Nicolas Maduro is that the last election in that country didn't legitimately elect Maduro to be president, well, the other person who stood with Maduro in that election was his vice president. And now Trump is recognizing her as the legitimate leader of Venezuela. So make that make sense, right? I mean, because of the illegitimacy of that last election, we invaded that country so that now we can recognize the vice president who was elected in that same illegitimate election? That doesn't make sense either. What's the actual reason that we did it? I mean, Marco Rubio says it wasn't an invasion at all. It wasn't an act of war. It wasn't even a military operation. He said it was just sort of an unusually large arrest. We just needed 15,000 troops and more than 100 aircraft and Delta Force there to protect the law enforcement officers who were carrying out the arrest. But it was just an arrest. And sure, why not arrest his wife too, right? Doesn't everybody always get arrested with their family members? And what kind of law enforcement operation, just serving an arrest warrant, as Marco Rubio would have us believe, what kind of law enforcement operation serving an arrest warrant like that ends with the arresting force saying, okay, now we run your country and also we are taking all your oil? And yes, Trump does bluntly say we're there for the oil. We're there to take the oil. Are we? Reuters had some really interesting reporting about that today, and I think this is going to turn out to be important here. Here's the headline from Reuters today. Quote, Trump administration has not consulted U.S. oil majors about Venezuela, oil execs say. Quote, the Trump administration did not consult with oil companies ExxonMobil, ConocoPhillips, or Chevron Corporation about Venezuela before or after U.S. forces captured the South American country's president, Nicolas Maduro, according to 4 oil industry executives familiar with the matter. That contradicts President Donald Trump's assertion aboard Air Force One on Sunday that he had spoken to all of the U.S. oil companies before and after Maduro's capture about his plans for investing in the country. 3 sources said the companies had no prior knowledge about the U.S. operation to seize Maduro and had held no conversations with the Trump administration about investing there as of Sunday. Trump told reporters, oh, yes, I've been talking to the oil companies. I talked to them before. I've talked to them since. The oil companies are like, no, dude, no, you didn't. Donald Trump likes the sound of "let's take the oil." He thinks that sounds cool and transgressive and tough. Thinks it makes him sound like kind of a king, kind of a military conquest kind of guy. Contrary to our popular imagination about Donald Trump, he supported the invasion of Iraq in 2003. He said he was for it. He actually said the only thing that was wrong with what we did in starting that disastrous war in Iraq is that we should have taken the oil. Even in his first run for president in 2016, he would repeat that. We should have taken the oil. He loves the sound of that. Does he know what that means? Because Venezuela's oil is not like sitting in barrels on shelves in a store and we can just march in there with a gun and a balaclava and demand that they hand it over. Venezuela's oil isn't sitting there for us to take in some convenient package. Venezuela's oil is under the surface of the earth. It needs to be drilled out, drilled down to, and then pumped up. And for that, you need a working electrical grid that provides you tons of reliable electricity. You need many trained workers. You need political stability and working ports and roads and physical security for your operations. You need contract law to work. You need billions and billions and billions of dollars, including billions of dollars worth of expensive equipment and expert investment. You need investments that you will not recoup immediately. It will take years, if not decades. I mean, if you're Exxon, do you think that because Trump just invaded and took away their president, now Venezuela is a great place? It's going to be an excellent and stable place to make big investments that won't pay off for years? Multi-billion-dollar investments that won't pay off for years, if not decades? Do you think they feel confident about that? And if you're the president of Exxon, you're thinking about that, and you're thinking about making those big investments to go drill oil in Venezuela and it won't pay off for years, are you sure that you're going to be able to recoup your investment? And once you start recouping your investment, are you planning on then donating the proceeds you earn to Donald Trump or to the U.S. Treasury? Because when Trump says we're going to take the oil, he's saying the oil is going to pay for us running that country indefinitely. It's going to reimburse us for everything we're going to do to run that country. So Exxon's just going to give us the money? Oil isn't a thing you just mug someone for and then take it to the pawn shop for cash. Donald Trump has liked the sound of take the oil for decades now. But take the oil doesn't even make sense to explain his invasion of Venezuela this weekend. Yes, the United States can take action to hurt their oil industry or their oil income, but there is no magic wand. There's certainly no military action that can be taken to, hey, presto, build them a new oil industry. And they wouldn't be able to even do it themselves under duress or even as a favor to Trump, just because Trump is threatening to invade them more times if they don't. And so what is it? Why do it? I would say the best clue that we have is this. CBS poll. Do you see Venezuela as a major threat to the security of the United States? No. 87% of the American public says no, we do not see Venezuela as a major threat to the United States. Same poll. Has the Trump administration clearly explained the U.S. position on military action in Venezuela? No. 76% of the public says no, there has not been a clear explanation from the Trump administration on whatever the heck it is doing in Venezuela. I mean, listen, at least when they started the Iraq war, they bothered to tell us fairy tales about it, right? to concertedly, strategically, energetically, in a sustained way, tell us big porky pie lies about supposed weapons in Iraq and how dangerous Saddam Hussein was to America. That was all designed to get the American people on the side of us invading Iraq, even if they did so under false pretenses. Here, they're barely bothered, right? Oh, yeah, we're going down there for drugs. Oh, I mean other drugs. No, we're going down there because we really don't like dictators. It's not going to fly. No, we're going to go down there and take the oil. Trump at least likes saying that, although there appears to be no operable planning behind it at all. I mean, maybe we just went down to Venezuela to enforce the gun laws, to charge Nicolas Maduro with illegal weapons possession. Or maybe we went for election integrity. I mean, does any of this sound remotely plausible or like they're even trying to make it seem plausible? They're not even trying. And maybe that is the important point here. Maybe the most important thing going on here is that Donald Trump does not believe he needs to even try to convince you of some reason, some false reason or some true reason that explains why he is using the U.S. military the way he is. Maybe what this is the simplest thing imaginable. Maybe what this is a president who can barely bother with coming up with some clearly false pretext, because what he really wants is totally unilateral, totally unaccountable, unquestioned ability to use the U.S. military anywhere for any purpose against anyone, even if it is inexplicable or unpopular or even illegal. He wants to break the perceived connection between public legitimacy for military action and the use of the United States military. He wants the ability to use the U.S. military with the consent of no one. And so we are seeing him use the U.S. military in the Middle East, yes, like lots of other presidents, and also in Nigeria, and also in Iran, and also now in the Caribbean, and in the Pacific, and in South America, and in Los Angeles, and in Portland, and in Chicago, and in Washington, and.